The blood of the heroes is closer to God than the ink of the philosophers and the prayers of the faithful. Now, this quote is by Julius Evola. Now, I don't know if it's in one of his books or if it's just a mere quote, but this is a very interesting quote. I think it's a very deep one. I believe it's more of a spiritual aspect and a perennial view. Once I get deeper into it, and I sort of want to do a video, make a video just discussing who is closer to God and what does he mean by this quote, and sort of breaking down the metaphysics, the general metaphysics of the warrior and war itself. So the inspiration is obviously grasped from Julius Evola's book, The Metaphysics of War, which I recommend anyone reading. And yeah, I just sort of want to dive into this and sort of talk about the spiritual aspect and the esoteric aspect of the warrior and its metaphysics. So what is Julius Evola essentially saying? Going back to that quote, and in my opinion, is essentially, as we see, it's pretty black and white, right? That the warrior is closer to God than the prayers of a faithful Christian or Muslim or whoever, and also the ink of a philosopher or a scholar. Now, but why is this? And obviously, the other question, and obviously the main reason is there's a lot, probably you can go deeper into it. And for me personally, I do agree with this quote. I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on it also, but in my opinion, it's a lot more spiritual and, if you like, I say the word a lot, but metaphysical. Rather than just because they're just fighting for death and fighting for a cause and getting bloody and sacrificing, putting their life on the line. Yes, that can, it's a very valid point to being closer to the divine, or more of a divine path to be more spiritual. But obviously, on the counter argument, to play devil's advocate, the philosopher or the prayers of the faithful, especially the philosophers, as we know through the past and history. There's been many influential philosophers that have dictated sort of modern life and has always held since. So we know, and that could be argued as, maybe in the Christian sense, as God's work, right? So that's quite I think that's quite a valid point for the counter argument. But we're going to more dive into the esoteric warrior side, and sort of the metaphysics of war itself, sort of signifying what the warrior goes through spiritually, because it's not just a physical war, it's just as spiritual as it is physical, if not more spiritual than physical. And as we know, a common denominator in the warrior in most religions is that a warrior, especially if they're fighting for a religious cause or a noble cause, it has some sort of divine interpretation. So let's say the Germanic or Norse pagans, they're fighting for the gods or for their family, but the gods are with them whilst doing it. There's a strong belief. So if they die in battle, the warrior goes to Valhalla. If he wins, then he inherits the victory. He inherits the earthly victory, whether it's a kingdom he has taken over, a land. He wins either way. It's same even for the Muslim. So if the Muslim wins, he inherits a earthly kingdom. If he dies in battle, fighting for Allah, fighting for a noble cause, for Allah, then he will be granted heaven. He'll be granted heaven. Now, obviously, that is well documented in the Quran, right? And even you look at the Knights Templars, I know some of them are Freemasons, but it was Christendom. They were martyrs. It was martyrdom. They died searching the bloodline of Christ back from Jerusalem. Obviously, more esoteric reasons than that. But if they were fighting for Christ and for their noble cause. So if they won, they inherited the earthly kingdom to continue their Masonic finds. But if they lost, they're dying for Christ and they're going to heaven because they fought for a noble cause. And this is essentially why the warrior is far more spiritual and closer to God, and is more of a divine path than what the ink of a philosopher or just a prayer of a monk or a faithful, devout, religious person would be. as we said, as I've said, they're going to war or to battle, and they're putting their life on the line. And if it's for a noble cause, they either die and are granted the Hall of Odin in Valhalla or Valhall, or if they win the battle, then they inherit earthly kingdom. So it's a win-win, but it's so close to God because you're almost experiencing death. You're fighting for your divine deities or the deity, that whether you're monotheist or heathen. So you're fighting for a cause. If it's a noble cause, then it's either going to be for your god or gods, or for maybe a separate cause for your family to defend. You never know. And the last time we sort of saw this was World War II. Obviously, you had the Third Reich fighting for what they believed in, and then you have the opposing side fighting for what they thought was right. And people will share different opinions, but I think that's the last time we sort of saw martyrdom, really, and that sort of that berserker, that inner pagan. And we haven't really sort of seen it since, because there hasn't really been a cause to fight for that's happened in a physical battle yet in Europe, really. But as I've said previously, the war isn't just physical. It isn't just swinging axes, firing guns, killing or being killed. It's also spiritual. The Vikings even used to take mushrooms before battle to sort of to sort of like hype them up, and then they'd see the gods before they go into battle, so it sort of gets them like in that zone. And the war is spiritual because the cause and the reason behind it is spiritual. As I've said, if you die in like Islam, even when it was the Knights Templars, the Crusades, and in Germanic paganism, it's for a spiritual cause. It's not just physical. It's not just, you're not just swinging an axe just to kill them. You're sending them to Valhalla, or you're getting sent to Valhalla, or you're winning the earthly kingdom. So it's the gods have granted you a victory either way. So all of it comes down in the end. The intention is it's like a spiritual awakening every time you do it. It's like entering a car crash, really. You're going into the unknown, not knowing whether you win or lose. But at the end of the day, it's all for a divine path and a divine sort of cause. You're doing it for a god or the gods, not just family. But if you're also doing it for the family, that's also a divine cause as well, because it's the most noble of causes. And even look at the Japanese, right? There's always honour in dying in battle and dying to the sword. The Vikings held that truthfully as well. Even the Muslims of old held that close as well. Dying in battle, there's so much honour in it, because as you can see, there's a very perennial view of the warrior, as I've sort of opened out the religions in how they view dying in battle. You can see there's a very perennial view in dying in battle. So there's nature tells us that dying in battle for a cause that you believe in, or a righteous cause, whether it's religious or something more personal, always leads back to the divine or the divine gods, and it always leads back to that. So therefore, naturally, we know many religions all interpret that dying in battle for a cause will see you in Odin's Hall, or in other religions a different interpretation. But it's very perennial view that the warrior's death is the most noble of deaths. And if it is perennial, then therefore surely it's all been sort of interpreted the same way, but just through different linguistics and different sort of causes, interpretation of the divine. But they all agree that dying a noble death in battle is the most spiritual event that you can have as a human. Whereas the philosopher would be using ink to write, and the prayers of the faithful, as Julius Evola said, they're not putting themselves in that spiritual moment. There's never a more spiritual moment than coming close to death and fighting. And the warriors were very, very religious as well. When we're speaking, at least, the warriors of old, at least, they wanted to die in battle if they were ever injured or there's ever put a disadvantage. So there is clearly a inner belief, a natural belief, that you will be rewarded for dying in battle. So surely, therefore, it's more impressive to the gods or God to fight and show courage, the courage of Tyr, and therefore, you're granted one of two victories: the heavens or the earthly kingdom after the victory. Now, the philosopher would only be writing. He would only be writing, where is the cause? And now we know how influential philosophy can be, but it's not as physically demanding and spiritually demanding as the warrior. They're leaving their family behind and going into the depths of the unknown. So they're more closer to that. They're more closer to sort of experiencing absolute nature in its purest existence, pure barbarianism or pure. It's absolutely, it's just nature sort of like unleashed, and you're in that moment, and whether you win or lose, it sort of just makes you more spiritually aware. You're either thankful for the win, or when you die, you experience, a noble sort of, a kind of a noble like afterlife, possibly, depending on the character. And you can sort of, in my opinion, I just sort of interpret as the warrior has a far more greater reason to live and to die than the philosopher. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, in my opinion, there's a good reason to argue for the philosopher, but it's not for a long-term cause. It's just writing thoughts, or if you're just praying, like let's say as a monk, you're not really living. You're not living in the now. It's kind of, you're just escaping Earth and its nature, and you're just sort of rejecting everything just to pray to God. Is that worthy of getting to heaven over a person that is fighting and dying for a cause that he truly believes in? And whether he dies, would that not be more favourable to God or the gods to bring into one of their 9 worlds or into heaven? Was that not more worthy? I think that's what the clear message is for me, in my opinion. Maybe even Julius Evola might relate to that. It's more favourable to God to see a warrior than just to see a mere philosopher. And I believe you can have the best of both worlds: a warrior who is philosophically intellectual. I think they're the best of both worlds. When you sort of have a Napoleon or Alexander, these guys were also philosophically astute. Sort of the best of both worlds, but these were like the absolute 1% of the 1%, the Übermensch, if you like, Nietzsche's Übermensch. And if you read Julius Evola's book, The Metaphysics of War, just to go back to the quote and sort of really sum up his reasoning, and if you do read it, you'll find that Julius Evola sort of, in that book, reiterates a lot, just dives into the perennial view, as I've been speaking about this video, the perennial view of the warrior and war, and the sort of metaphysics of war, and how loads of different religions hold a perennial belief about dying in battle or honour in war and death in battle. And that's basically Evola's main argument and point, is that many religions, especially the Aryan Indo-European faiths, and even in Islam, as I've said, even Christianity of old, that they all agreed upon a noble death. And that's the main sort of point and argument Evola makes. So I just wanted to dive deeper into it, and then, sort of to get everyone to sort of understand maybe his viewpoint and to break down that quote. Like the similarities and like the sort of how each religion shows its belief in dying in battle, the similarities in it, how similar they are, and how they all sort of teach the same thing in that realm of life. It's hard not to then believe that there is some truth in that. There has to be. It shows that is probably the closest you get to God, because all religions preach the same outcome in that realm, in that topic. So it's quite an interesting point. I believe it's a fantastic quote, but there's so much to dive into. So yeah, that's sort of the best way to sum up quickly after so many minutes of talking. But that's I think that's the best sort of way to just sum up quickly on why Evola says it. Let me know your guys' thoughts as well. I thought it was quite an interesting quote and topic to break down. I could go a bit more in depth, but I'm probably missing some points to make. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments, whether you agree or disagree. And yeah, thank you for watching.